Welcome to It's Not Just Business Talks with Sonja, where we get down to the real business of how great leaders dug through their own trenches and climbed some epic mountains to get where they are today. Now let's get started with the show.
I'm here today with Joshua Rood, co-founder and chief rabbit of Dr. Hop's Real Hard Kombucha. He grew up equally in Maine and California. He has experience in food, beverage, branding, event management, and transformative education, which we'll hear about. He embodies a commitment to community, excellence, and fun, and serves as the CEO and managing director of Dr. Hops. How'd I do, Joshua?
Great.
Welcome. Great. Wow. I'm super stoked to speak with you. And I got a little chance to ask you a couple questions before this. And you know, the place that I'm going to begin, because there's so much in your story, is how did you start? And I know we talked just a few minutes ago about Tommy, but tell me how did Dr. Hops come into existence, which is your hard kombucha, real hard kombucha, which is unique in and of itself. But where did this idea come from?
I mean, if you really want the beginning, you have to go way back, probably millennia.
Okay, I love it. Well, you can give me.
But I think like there was a point in 2014 when I was working with Lululemon, athletic wear company in Berkeley, where Lululemon really was only in Berkeley for community purposes. It wasn't a very profitable store, but it was a hotbed of transformation and yoga and community. Mm-hmm. So I was managing the community team at the Berkeley store, and I was assistant manager for the store. And I hired an awesome person to work on my team, who is now Tommy's wife. She introduced me to Tommy. Mm-hmm. At that time in 2014, there was so much creativity happening in craft beer. Like it was really exploding. And it was starting to happen to kombucha. Like I started to see these local kombucha brands popping up in little markets all around me. And I had been drinking kombucha for 5 or 6 years, but probably longer, almost 15 years at that point. But, all that was happening. And I discovered there was one product in the world that was a alcoholic kombucha. It was from Michigan. Uh-huh. It was from Michigan. It was a very quirky, original brand. And I started to just hoard as much of it as I could and share it with as many people as I could, because I thought the idea of it was amazing. Like it was the best idea. And I had a strong background as a bartender and a food person, lots and lots of beverage and food background. And then I had this whole health and yoga background as well.
What a marriage.
Yeah. So it was just so exciting. And then when I got introduced to Tommy and I, he ended up coming to a big event that I threw at my house, and we ended up getting in a very heated discussion about the pros and cons of this idea and this product. And he was a brewer, a beer brewer and a kombucha brewer. So after this, probably like 2 hours of heated conversation, I said, well, look, if you think you can make this really, really great, like as good as a good beer or as good as a good wine, then we're going to start something. So go show me what you can do. And that's how we started.
Wow. And so, I mean, first of all, define great, because I've tasted all of your products that you have out there right now. And I can speak from experience. The overwhelming response to drinking it, any of the flavors, and we like them all, is wow. And it's not just wow because it tastes great. There's a very unique experience, right? It's almost. I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth or tease anyone on this, but it's a unique beverage experience. It's not like just sipping a glass of wine. It's not like drinking a beer. It's unique, wouldn't you say, Joshua? I mean,
I certainly would.
Yeah, I mean, it's
great that you experience it that way.
Yeah, it's transcendental in some ways. I don't know how else to express it. It was very unique for us, and every single one of us, the whole team that had a chance to drink it, had that same response. Wow. and maybe a unicorn emoji right afterwards. So, so how did you decide? Like, how is this going to be great? Was it the flavors? Is it the experience? Is it what makes Dr. Hops what it is? What was your vision about what you sent Tommy away to do?
Yeah, there's two sides to that, right? The basic idea was literally on a sticky note that I gave to Tommy, and it just said probiotic, gluten-free, 8% alcohol or greater. Awesome.
Do you still have that sticky note? That
I have it somewhere.
You should frame it. Yeah.
So that was the basic idea. I'm like, look, if you can do all four of these things, like the world wants that. The world wants that. And nobody else can do that. Nobody else is doing it. Not those four things, not really. So that was the focus of it. You know, ultimately, as Tommy and I developed it, it took us 3 years, really just completely behind the scenes. I mean, we were public about what we were doing, but we weren't really selling anything.
Right.
It's just 3 years of product development and learning the business and the licensing and all that stuff. You know, what it became was a very prismatic approach. You know, there's so many different, you know, somewhat small aspects that go into making a food or a beverage. And my philosophy has been, well, let's do every single one of them better. let's do it fresher and like higher quality, fresher ingredients, more alive and balanced. And if we can get all of that stuff working together in a balanced way, it's going to be awesome. And that's been our focus. Like we're not a commercial enterprise first and then a beverage maker. We're a beverage maker first and then a commercial enterprise. Like we know that there's a commercial opportunity here, but our passion is for wow.
For the wow.
That's what if we can't make wow, then we're not interested.
Right. With the unicorn emoji. I'm just going to add the wow unicorn. I think that was Dawn on our team that just literally wow, star, unicorn, star. I mean, this is how we feel about it. And I encourage everyone to have that experience. But I mean, you're starting from scratch and you're behind the scenes learning the commercial side of the beverage industry. Was that you, Joshua? Did you have to dig through and figure out how to get into markets and how to ship things from point A to point B? And that was.
Yep, that was me. Mostly I just wanted Tommy to focus purely on production and formulation and process. And because the product, the passion we have for the product is that important. Like if there's two people, one of them is just that. Like that's how important it is. So I did the rest. I did everything else. And you know, because we were starting from scratch and we don't have previous experience in you know, consumer packaged goods, at least not as high level executives or brand owners. You know, I went after you know, a lot of high level advisors to provide the experience and the framework for where we needed to go.
That's actually brilliant. Ask, pave the way by asking, because the rest of us, you know, we tend to do it by banging our head on the wall until we get an opening. And then,
well, I definitely do that.
And how did you find those advisors? I mean, was that just a reach out or referrals? Or I'm curious about that because I just advised my own brother yesterday. The most impressive thing I've ever done for my company is to get help, get a coach, get an advisor, get people that know more than you know. But it took me a long time to get to that point. So how did you do that?
I mean, it was a very organic thing that it sprung directly from our expressing our values. You know, one of our values is community. And from the very beginning, I was as public and community oriented about what we were doing as I could possibly imagine being. Like, we basically just started having events and sharing what we were making with the people that we loved or people that we thought would love what we were doing, or both, right? Sharing in lots of events at like yoga studios, you know, or other athletic oriented things or other community oriented things. And pretty early on, we met a fermentation specialist who started just showing up at all these, like he was really into fermentation, really into food. He started showing up at all of our events. And because we kept having events, he kept getting more and more interested in what we were doing. And we kept having more and more conversations about it. He ended up being our very first advisor. He then introduced us to one of his best friends who had been an executive at a beverage company and had done many other interesting things. He then introduced us to the co-founder and CEO of Numi Tea, which was a very community-driven Oakland-based business.
Yeah.
Which I long respected and admired. So it really grew directly because we were so active in the community, sharing. We met these people.
Right. Absolutely. And who do you want to give any of those people names? And I'm curious about if you want to give them a shout out. If not, no worries.
Yeah. I mean, they're
valuable parts of the process. Yeah.
They're a huge part of the process, and they're a huge contribution to where we're at now and where we want to go. And Alex Lewin was the first person. Alex has a couple of books on fermentation, fermented foods and fermented beverages.
Fascinating. Yeah.
And he's also one of the co-founders of the Fermentation Association, which is fairly young, but very interesting, very exciting organization. Alex introduced us to his buddy, whose name is Murat. Murat was the former COO of Adina. Adina was a fairly short-lived flavored water company. Okay. Like early on in the flavored water game. It was run by Greg Steppenpool, the guy who started Odwalla.
Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and so and then Murat introduced us to Ahmed. Ahmed Rahim is the co-founder with his sister of Numi Tea, and Ahmed is still our lead advisor and our biggest champion.
That's great
in the industry.
That's brilliant. That's great, and you're surrounded by people who clearly, first of all, have a passion for the beverage and food industry and have a passion for, I understand those products, quality, community, because they came around you with community, which, that's priceless. Great stuff. So tell me, actually, Joshua, you bring community up a lot, and it's a really core part of what your company is and who you are as an individual. And you also are a part of the Landmark Forum and Landmark organization. Can you espouse a little bit more about that whole, what your thought process is and what your feelings are about this, sense of community that's so important to you?
Yeah. Landmark is an extraordinary organization that is committed to both personal and professional, like growth and training and development and transformation. And if you really dive into personal transformation, doesn't take very long before you discover that the individual is a tiny part of what personal transformation is all about.
Right.
And pretty soon you get from, individual to like partnership, like a marriage or a friendship or any kind of partnership. And then you get to family. Then now you're talking 5 to 10, 15 people. Then you get to community. You get these ever larger levels of who we are in the world. And so Landmark, that's what they do. They address transformation on all those levels, all the way up to world. I mean, they don't really go beyond world.
Not yet.
we don't have access to that really right now, but not any obvious access. But in doing all that work, and I've trained myself to lead those programs as well. So I'm really immersed in it. And so Dr. Hops grew out of all of that work and that love and that commitment to who we really are as human beings.
Yeah.
And so Dr. Hops is an expression of that. And even though, Tommy didn't have that same background, and he's done some of Landmark's programs now, but he had his own, a very authentic and very deep appreciation for all of that world in his own right. So when we got together, we talked about, well, what do we want Dr. Hops to be about? And those conversations were absolutely seminal. And, community was one of the things, one of the values we identified as, though this is, when you look at core values, either for an individual or an organization, these are things that you will not proceed without. Like you are not willing to sacrifice these things, or they are not core.
100%. Yeah.
They're core. So community is one of those things, and it fits us, of course, because we make it an alcoholic beverage, which is by nature social.
Social, sure. Well, yep. And I mean, the thing that keeps striking me is your beverages also are feel transcendental, which is a lot about what's going in transcendental versus or transformational. I mean, literally going back to wow, emoji, unicorn. There's something that doesn't just come through on your philosophy and your core values, but in the actual consumption of the beverage. It goes all the way through. Which is, taking your core values all the way to the finish line. It's pretty impressive. Yeah.
That's definitely my intention, all the way down.
And so the interesting thing about your and I've looked, we talked about your brand at length in previously. And one of the key brand elements, of course, is the rabbit. And for some people, that's just a rabbit, but that's certainly, there's a lot more that you learned along the way. And I think you mentioned you got some of that from your wife, Lisa. But tell us why the rabbit and why does that matter? And a little bit about that part of the story. Yeah,
you realize there's like a novel about every aspect of Dr.
That's what I feel. I know you can only scratch the surface on all of these little elements. We'll have to have you back. And then the next thing is everybody just needs to drink Dr. Hops hard kombucha, and then we'll all know. They won't even need to hear this. They'll just know after they drink it.
Still need to hear. It's these things are stories, right? We are stories. But this is a very special part of Dr. Hops because, first of all, my wife is probably the most loving and supportive human being on the planet.
Wow, good for her.
And she's also trained at Landmark in how to do that effectively. Mm-hmm. But I met Lisa in 2008 or something like that, 2007, 2008, and we recognized very early that we were a perfect partnership. We wanted the same things. We were committed to the same things. We could offer each other exactly what we each needed. So it didn't take us very long. It was probably only a year until we were married or something. But somewhere in there, she said, Joshua, we're going to get a rabbit. And I'm like, what do you mean? I found this rabbit. It's this particular breed. Very finicky. Most people aren't going to be able to take care of this rabbit. It was rescued from a park. Like, this rabbit needs me. I'm like, great. Okay, let's get a rabbit. So we ended up with this rabbit. It's a little rabbit, like, 4 pounds or something like that. Okay. Almost all fur. A lion head rabbit is the name of the type of rabbit. Okay. And that rabbit's name was Dr. Hops.
No kidding.
And that wasn't even our name. Somebody else brilliant had already given her the name Dr. Hops. So we got Dr. Hops and I started learning about rabbits. And then, 5 or 6 years later, when I was talking to Tommy about this idea, and Tommy and I from the beginning wanted to make a beverage that, again, because it honored the awesomeness that was happening in craft beer. And it honored the awesomeness that was happening in kombucha and health and like CPG. We loved hops. We weren't going to make a marijuana product. We were going to make something that was overtly legal. Right. And hops are the closest thing. Like, hops are these insanely aromatic, beautiful, terpene-rich lupulins. And so I don't know, Dr. Hops is perfect. She was the cutest thing ever. She was, really for me, an homage to Lisa and to Lisa's love for creatures and the world. And she, and she was clever. I mean, clever in terms of a rabbit.
And so that was actually, and there's a lot of, I think you're the one that told me that there's a lot of magic in the lore of rabbits as well. Do you want to tell me a little bit more about that? Because you're the one, I think, that brought that to my attention. And that just, to me, made so much sense to go again with this hard kombucha, which has already got these feels like magical qualities to it, that you have a rabbit as part of the brand.
Yep. Yeah. Funny thing is, Tommy turned out to be a rabbit person. How random is that? He had a rabbit named Angie, a beautiful white rabbit. Dark. She's one of those white rabbits with the dark eyeshadowy eyes. Very, very beautiful. And yes, like I started to really sink my teeth into that when, definitely no pun intended there. When we started to develop the idea for the business, because, yes, we literally want to make something a beverage that is magical. It is alcohol and party, and it's legitimately health conscious.
Yeah.
Like that's magic. And,
yeah.
And to do that in a way that's extremely pleasing and tasty, like that's magic, right? So we're out to make magic. We have this rabbit. She's incredible. She's the actual Dr. Hops was very mysterious in her own way because she was so furry. You could hardly even tell what she was, right? Okay. You could hardly even see her features or her face. Like, what is that thing? Is it an alien? Is it a dog? What is that thing? So she was very mysterious. And then immediately I remembered one of my favorite stories as a kid was the Velveteen Rabbit.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Story of this toy getting turned into a real living, breathing creature through this extraordinary amount of love over time. And if there was ever an analogy for creating a brilliant business or brand or community in the world, it's exceptional commitment and love over time. So
I love that. Exceptional commitment and love over time.
It takes time. It takes a long time.
And a lot of love. And a lot of the other thing about the Velveteen Rabbit is, I mean, its eyes were coming off and its fur was coming off, and it just doesn't matter, right? It's just sincere love. Yep.
So it all ties together. And then of course there are some incredible rabbit stories, whether it's Watership Down, and that's a very violent story, but it's a very amazing story also. Alice in Wonderland, of course, is probably the most famous rabbit story of all time, I think, without doubt. And it's also somewhat psychedelic, and that was a part of our vision. Is we're making an intoxicating beverage. We're making a psychically active beverage. So the story of Alice in Wonderland is part of our thematic expression as well. So
as you've got going down the rabbit hole is one of the most common names or terms that we use in daily life for,
especially in the last, I think, 5 to 10 years, it's become even more popular to say that. I think.
Yeah. Right.
Could just be that I'm now focused on rabbits, but
it's kind of like when you are pregnant, all you see is babies everywhere. Maybe you're focused on it, but I do know that whenever the term going down the rabbit hole does actually, from my personal experience, apply to drinking Dr. Hops. So, there is that. Again, there's just so many analogies that tie really well together with your drink.
Those are all parts of the story we're out to tell and what we're out to share with the world.
I mean, you sound so positive and so patient where with it. And that's not everyone's experience in business for sure. I mean, where's Dr. Hops now? How are you feeling? I mean, it's been a few years. You've been out on market. You're in multiple Whole Foods and other similar food, right? Grocery chains and so forth. How is the business market, especially going through COVID, when you had restrictions in delivery and keeping something like that cold? And, tell me a little bit about the last couple of years.
Yeah. I mean, the last couple of years since the pandemic have been super challenging, but not for us, not any more or less challenging than anything else. I mean, it's definitely, these are real circumstances that we're dealing with that alter what you can and can't do. But I mean, it's definitely been a lot slower, and I wouldn't say it's been more difficult than expected, but the experience of it is different than the expectation of it, right? Now there's a siren.
That's all good. This is a live conversation. That's how that works.
So I mean, it's been super challenging, and it's been way slower than any of us want, or than we thought, or than we said at the beginning, right? Since we founded the LLC in 2015. We started with a Kickstarter. Had almost no money of our own, so we just had to started from scratch in every way. Started in the business from scratch and with the funding from scratch. So, I mean, it's not a surprise that it's taken us as long as it has to get to where we're at. And it's not a surprise that companies that are able to raise $30 to $40 million based on their pedigree can do things we can't do right now.
Sure.
I mean, so we're constantly up against that. And we do know that because the whole idea of hard kombucha is new, there is absolutely a race, and it is a rat race.
It's not a rabbit race. It's a rat race. Yep.
It is a rat race. There's a race to capture the market and be be one of those founding brands that everyone remembers forever and ever and ever. And, it doesn't usually actually go that way anyway, but that is happening. And that's very scary. I mean, we can't compete on a lot of levels. We've still raised all the money we've raised so far on, friends and family convertible note type raise. We haven't raised $5, $10, $15 million. Sure. So, I mean, those things are very real pressures, or I don't know if they're actually real, but they're pressures that I definitely perceive a lot. And they're super challenging. I mean, it's competitive as all heck.
Yeah. I mean, I understand. And a lot of our clients would relate to that, because most of our clients, we don't even usually work with companies that have raised venture capital. We like working with the small to mid-sized business that is doing it it's the slow pace, right? It's the Velveteen Rabbit route versus the rat race. We prefer that. I think it's a really holistic experience for the client as well, for you. Right? Because it's like the difference between waking up one morning and winning $1 million by the lottery versus having earned all that rich experience that you get from the journey versus just showing up one day with $1 million. Not saying,
I think you have to earn it either way.
Yeah.
But for us, I mean, we're doing the best we can with what we have. I mean, and we have this particular strengths and weaknesses that we have, but we also do have we would rather make something that's magical than make something that's profitable quickly. Like, we're trying to do both. Right. But we do have our priorities, and
and you're not going to compromise magic.
Yeah. If we still think there's any decent chance at making something truly valuable for people, that really is a wow, like inspiring. If we have any chance of making something that inspires people and having it be commercially successful, we are not going to abandon the point.
Absolutely.
To make something that inspires people.
Absolutely.
So that's the path we're on.
It's an amazing process. And I'm curious though, where can people find Dr. Hops now? In the footprint of the United States, where do they find it most commonly?
Yeah, I mean, you can find it throughout California pretty easily. We're in most of the Whole Foods in California. We're in most of the along the coast. A lot of higher quality independent grocery stores or liquor stores, or and we're in mostly the whole coastline of California.
Okay, great.
And you can buy our products online anywhere in California, right? Easy. You'll get it within a week. You can buy it in Oregon, but only online. And we're not really an online business, so most people don't know anything about that. You can buy it in Arizona. We have Sprouts and Whole Foods in Arizona, so got it. Pretty good availability there. And then in Florida, it's primarily Whole Foods in Florida and a few other independent natural food stores. And that's what it looks like right now.
Yeah.
So only a few hundred accounts.
Yeah.
Total, some 400 or 500.
That's it. I marvel at you saying only 400 or 500 because that's pretty big. And it's a pretty big footprint already for such a young company.
Yeah. I mean, when Tommy and I, really look at it, like it's a pretty awesome accomplishment for
it is
starting from inspiration,
Mm-hmm.
And then, but when you compare to what companies are doing that have raised the $40 million, then you're like, oh man,
I
you
know.
stink.
So if that was on the table, if there was an organization, and I'm making this up, but if there's somebody said, hey, you know what, I'm super into this, I want to invest 10 million. Are you open to that? Or is that you don't want that type of,
No, we do. But the way that we are built is, anyone would not, it would be very challenging to evaluate what we have now as worth, as like, we're not like $100 million company at this stage. And
to
be able to get that kind of investment requires evaluation of a level that's, we're looking for ways to show that we actually are worth a lot more than say our gross revenue would indicate, and it's still a significant gross revenue, but it doesn't get venture capitalists excited.
Well, I mean, and there's a certain magic to that too, right? Because there's venture capital and then there's a belief in the product, which, or an inspiration for the product itself, because you do have something unique.
Yes. Well, and when I say venture, when I really, when I really look at the word venture capital, our venture is about, it is very much about like inspiring people, wowing people, having our core values expressed in the world, contributing something magical to life on the planet. Yeah. Because people could really use a little more magic and awesomeness in their lives.
Yeah.
And that's part of our venture. So if there's going to be a venture capitalist interested in us, they're going to be interested in that part of our venture too.
Exactly. They're going to be drawn to you. That's what I was thinking. They're going to be drawn to that. So, Josh, you're a fascinating individual and we're really lucky to get to know you and know you. But I'm curious, there was one more person or couple that you wanted to give a shout out to before we let you go. And that was your parents, which is really great. Being a mother of a few kids myself, I would love my kids to actually ever want to give me a shout out today. Right now, they're still at the phase of, can I have some money, please? So no shout outs for me, but you get along with your parents. You love your parents. Why are they, aside from that, why do they matter so much for Dr. Hops?
Yeah. I mean, again, this goes back to my development as a human and my commitment to the transformation of what is available for human beings on the planet and who we are. And if you really get into who you are and if you don't get down to your parents, you're in trouble. Because you literally don't exist without them. And I don't care if you had exactly the parents that you wanted or the parents you absolutely didn't want. Everything that you are would not be possible without them. And that's an actual fact. So it's not always easy to remember that or live true to that. But I've spent a lot of my adult life since I became for myself an adult sometime around 30-ish. I've spent a lot of effort, like honoring that and discovering that reality for myself. And my parents, turned out to be, my father is, he brought this into our family conversation recently. There's been a lot of entrepreneurial groundwork laid in our family. Like nobody is a famous entrepreneur, but almost everyone in the family has done entrepreneurial things. And a lot of us, many of them. So
wow, interesting.
He's one of my most fundamental business advisors. He's a small investor in Dr. Hops, but mostly I just know that no matter what I'm dealing with, I can talk to him about it.
That's great.
Like, it doesn't I don't have to spin anything. I don't have to spin anything.
You can be your whole self with your father. That's a pretty...
Yeah. I mean, whether it's good or bad or whatever, I can just, if I need someone to talk to, I can talk to him, and he's a very good listener. So, and my mom she would, she has done and would do anything, and my brother. So, again, none of this would be possible without them. Literally nothing that I do. So that's why I think it's important to mention them. And then I wanted to mention Ahmed too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, and Ahmed is one of your senior or your most senior advisors from the tea company that you mentioned, right?
Yeah. Ahmed's really our like, as a consumer product goods company, he's like our dad. I mean, he's not really our dad, but he's like our lead advisor.
Yeah.
He loves, and he aligns with everything that we care about. He wants he is a venture supporter in that way. Like, he is as much about what Tommy and I care about in life and what the brand is really for as he is about its commercial success. And he definitely wants both.
Sure.
But he's a huge asset to us and a real gift. And he's also a massively community driven human being. Like, he's a master of community. So that's also why we've aligned ourselves with him. And then I gotta give, since you've already brought up my wife, Lisa, everyone needs to know.
Everybody needs to get the shout out because they're all part of your community.
I mean, there's thousands of people, right? Yep. But Ray, who is the person who first introduced me to Tommy and who is now Tommy's wife, Ray is very magical in her own right, in her own unique way, and she saw something like so early on, right? Like she saw something in her now husband Tommy that really was calling to be expressed, right? Like, he was ruining their kitchen with all of his brewing experiments, right? Not it's pretty messy business. It's kind of smelly too.
Yeah.
But she saw something and she said, "You need to talk to Tommy." And so that none of this would be happening without Ray.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love this. I love Lisa, Ray, Tommy, Ahmed, your parents, the rabbit, everything. I just love the whole story and the way that you just shared that. I mean, you're basically telling the story of community and how one thing, it starts with you and it just keeps. I mean, I would even say go beyond this world, but we don't need to go there just now. You have to drink the Dr. Hops to get beyond this world.
It will help you see a few things beyond this world. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Joshua. And I have a little closing thing I want to just say here because I have to do it. We've been talking to Joshua Rood, CEO and managing director of Dr. Hops, and Joshua, where can people learn more about you and your product, aside from going to Whole Foods?
I think drhops.com is the best place to start. It's drhops.com.
All right.
There's, I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on Facebook and, there's.
You're discoverable.
I'm discoverable. Yeah. I'm intentionally public about what I'm doing because it's really for the core values of it. It's for the contribution that I intend it to be.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be public.
Yep. It's supposed to be.
You can find me.
Okay. I think that's how we found you.
Probably is.
Well, thank you, Josh. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to It's Not Just Business Talks with Sonja, a real-life podcast to inspire you. We'll see you again next time, and if this is your jam, click subscribe to get future episodes.